Hashem. Thank you, 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 Hashem. Hello, my holy sisters and brothers. That is a rockin' tune from Joey Newcomb and Moshe Storch singing, Thank you, Hashem. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, that we are together and learning on this fine Monday evening. Let's light up the darkness. Who is gonna be with us as we get together to do a little learning? Stephen from Dover, New Hampshire, Yehuda from Florence, South Carolina, Pauline from Arkansas, Melissa from Great Neck, Lucy from Minnesota, James from Indianapolis, Nancy from North Carolina, Ann from Merced, Owen from New York City, Brandon from Knoxville, Tennessee. Bill says, Shalom, spent a lot of today walking in the forests and fields of the land my grandmother left me, feeling particularly moved by the beauty of God's creation tonight. Thank you for sharing, Bill. I don't know what that is. And Mark Cover says, hello from Kansas City Chiefs Kingdom. All right. But the Giants, although we're the worst football team in the NFL, we're coming back. We're coming back. Okay, and over on the YouTube side, Lynn is with us from Texas, and Lindsay singing Thank You, Hashem is with us from Cincinnati. Hello, everybody. It's good to be with you. We've got a great page tonight. We're going to look at a couple of different concepts. What happens when there's a ruin between two neighbors? A torn down house exists between two neighbors and their courtyards. And also what happens if your neighbor is the veritable 800-pound gorilla, right? If you've got your small little courtyard and it opens up into your neighbor's big luxury courtyard, what implications does that have for halakha, for the law according to Torah? What's going on, everybody? Hanukkah is coming up soon. Nina will put the link to our store, shop.accidentaltalmudist.org. This is one of the t-shirts we've got there. We've got funny shirts, meaningful shirts, inspiring shirts, towels, and pillows. This is our wisdom candle pillow. This wisdom candle is, it's like I designed this. It's our artwork. This is the wisdom candle means accidental Talmudist and lighting up the darkness together across states, countries, continents. But I got to tell you, this pillow, we ordered one so that we could show it. We thought it would be nice. We use this constantly. It is a great throw pillow to have on a couch. It comes in all different colors. The wisdom candle is beautiful and inspiring. But what I want to tell you is this material, I don't know if you could tell in the camera, it's textured and it's soft. And I don't know, we're always fighting over who's going to be lying on it on the couch. In fact, we're going to order some other ones because of it. So highly recommend the Wisdom Candle pillow at shop@accidentaltalmudist.org. Makes an excellent Hanukkah gift, holiday gift. The t-shirts, like I say, we have funny ones, inspiring ones, meaningful ones. Check it out. I'm not really a good pitchman or salesman, but these things are good, and all proceeds support our nonprofit, enabling us to share Jewish wisdom with the whole world. So highly recommended there. Link in the comments, but easy to remember, shop.accidentaltalmudist.org. Okay. Let's get into it. So where are we holding? We are on Daf Tzadi Base. That's page 92 in Tractate Eruvin, the third volume of the Talmud. We're really getting near the end. There's 105 pages in this tractate. We're on page 92. We're in chapter 9. We're concluding our discussion of the first Mishnah today and opening our discussion of the second Mishnah. So, we've been talking about this permit, this leniency of Rabbi Shimon, who disagreed with everyone else, but eventually the law was like Rabbi Shimon, that vessels, objects that are movable on Shabbos, as opposed to things which are not movable, things that are muksa, like money. You don't touch money on Shabbos because there's no permitted use of money on Shabbos. But bowls, plates, glasses, any kind of vessels that you would use for eating, certainly those things can be moved on Shabbos. Any of those types of objects which at the outset of Shabbos, nightfall on Friday, were sitting in a courtyard outdoors, or on a rooftop outdoors, or in an enclosure outdoors, and they were there when Shabbos began, it is permitted to transfer them from one courtyard to another, or even from a courtyard to a rooftop, or from a rooftop to an enclosure. All of these kinds of enclosures, literally enclosures, courtyards, rooftops, according to Rabbi Shimon, are sort of one master domain, and these objects can be transferred from any one to the other of these kinds of enclosures, right? Of enclosures. The other rabbis didn't agree with him, but the law came out like Rabbi Shimon. One of the rabbis who sort of testified and said, yeah, the law is like Rabbi Shimon in this regard, was Rabbi Yochanan. We've learned about Rabbi Yochanan. We had a whole show on Rabbi Yochanan. Very inspiring story. You can look that up on our website. Ravina said to Rav Ashi, did Rabbi Yochanan actually say that the law accords with Rabbi Shimon? This would seem to contradict another ruling of Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan also said that the law accords with the unattributed Mishna, and it's one we've learned a month ago, maybe not even a month ago. Didn't we also learn that Rabbi Yochanan says the law accords with this Mishnah, where it says that if we have a wall between two courtyards, and the wall is at least 10 handbreadths high and at least 4 handbreadths wide, so it's a significant wall, it's a hush of a wall, right? A significant wall. So such a wall, in the absence of a doorway or some kind of opening in the wall, if such a wall separates two courtyards, well, then those courtyards cannot make an Eruv with each other. They should have Eruvs in their respective courtyards, so people can carry objects from the houses in those shared courtyards out into the courtyard, but they're not going to be able to make an Eruv with the neighboring courtyard that's on the other side of this big significant wall. They have to have separate Eruvs, right? But in that situation, according to the Mishnah, if there was some fruit on top of the wall, there was some discussion about what you can do with such fruit. Let's say, assume the fruit was there at the beginning of Shabbos. Some said you can't even touch the fruit, you can't do anything with the fruit. But Rabbi Yochanan said, no, the position in the Mishnah which says unattributed, meaning a majority position as stated by Rabbi Meir, the law is that we can go up on the wall and we can eat the fruit that's on the wall, but we can't take the fruit down from the wall. Now, if that's true, that we can't take the fruit down from the wall that's between these two courtyards, well, the fruit was outside at the beginning of Shabbos. Fruit is food. It's an object that can certainly be moved on Shabbos. So why can't we move it from one courtyard to another over that wall, or from that wall down into the courtyard? Now, you might say, well, the wall itself, because it's 4 cubits wide and over 10 cubits high, might be considered to be its own private domain. But no, it's definitely the wall of a courtyard. You might say it's split between the courtyards, but it is definitely nullified to the status of the courtyards. It's not going to count as its own domain. So it ought to be possible to move fruit from one courtyard to another. Why did the Mishnah say, and Rabbi Yochanan agree, that you can't take the fruit down from the wall, apparently into the courtyard? It said you can't take it down from the wall. You can go up on the wall and eat the fruits that's there. That was actually a leniency compared to, I believe it was Rav, who said, no, you can't even touch it, because if you move that fruit at all, you're disturbing something in another courtyard that's not your own, and you can't do that. But Rabbi Yochanan said, no, you can ascend to the wall and eat the fruit that's on there. You just can't bring it down. But if objects that start Shabbos outdoors in a courtyard can be transferred to other courtyards, why can't we bring the fruit down from the wall? That's the question that Ravina is putting to Rav Ashi. And the Gemara answers, presumably on behalf of Rav Ashi, and these are the guys who edited the Gemara, so that's why it's the two of them talking, says, no. When it says that you can't bring it down from the wall, what it means is you can't bring it down from the wall and into the house, right? Because this permit of Rabbi Shimon's is you can move stuff from courtyard to courtyard, but you can't bring it from, if it started outside and there's no Eruv, you can't bring it from the courtyard into the house. You can't bring stuff that started in the house out to a courtyard and then use Rabbi Shimon's permit to transfer from one courtyard to another. It only applies to things that started in the courtyard. They can be moved to other courtyards. Likewise, the fruit can be moved from one courtyard to another. When we say we can't take it down, we mean you can't take it down from the wall and bring it in the house. And that's how we square these two rulings of Rabbi Yochanan. There is no contradiction when we understand exactly what was being said. But then the Gemara comments, but wait a minute, didn't Rabbi Chia say in a Tosefta, right? So what's a Tosefta? The Tosefta was the very first layer of commentary on the Mishnah. So the Mishnahs were the rulings that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi included in the Mishnah of the earlier rabbis. The ones that didn't get included but were recorded are known as baraisas, right? They're rulings of the Mishnaic period that didn't get into the Mishnah. But there's also Toseftas, which are contemporaneous pretty much with the baraisas and Mishnahs, maybe just a little bit later or toward the end of that period, often with a little extra information in them to help us understand the Mishnahs and the baraisas. So here we have Rabbi Chia, who was a student of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the one who redacted the Mishnah. And Rabbi Chia says in a Tosefta that, well, you can bring the fruit down into the courtyard, provided that on neither side, the people who bring the fruit down into their courtyard, that they don't stand there and eat the fruit. Presumably he's saying you can eat the fruit on the wall, you can bring it down into your courtyard, but you can't eat it. Why would he say that? We don't even know why he said it. We don't discuss why he said it, because Rav Ashi says to Ravina, you can't bring a proof from this ruling of Rabbi Chia in a Tosefta that contradicts the Mishnah, which was written down according to the understanding of the law as it was at that time by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, because Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was Rabbi Chia's teacher, direct teacher. And so where would Rabbi Chia get this ruling if he learned from the Mishnah from his teacher, the one who edited the Mishnah himself? And it's like Rabbi Chia is like adding some ruling of his own. And so in order for us to square the Mishnah with this Tosefta, we're going to have to distort the Mishnah somehow, and we're not going to do that. We're just going to say that Rabbi Chia was talking about something else. We don't have a full understanding of what Rabbi Chia was trying to say, but we're not going to distort our understanding or our recording of the Mishnah as set down by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, because his student said something that is apparently contradictory. And we understand from this that if there are two Mishnahs that contradict each other, okay, then we have to dig deeper and try to understand why they seem to contradict each other. It's because we don't understand something and we have to look in between the lines or bring in other sources and figure out what it is that they were talking about if two Mishnahs contradict each other, because Mishnahs should not contradict each other. But if a Mishnah and a Baraisa contradict each other, or a Mishnah and a Tosefta contradict each other, we go with the Mishnah. And that's what we're learning from that example. New case. Now, remember that Rav, who disagreed with Rabbi Shimon's leniency, nevertheless said, okay, I understand. It's the law. All right. It's the law. You can move stuff from courtyard to courtyard as long as it started outside on Shabbos, or courtyard to rooftop, or courtyard to enclosure, enclosure to rooftop, etc. These are all one kind of domain. However, said Rav, this is only going to apply for objects that start in a courtyard where inside that courtyard they did not make an Eruv. Right? Because if they made an Eruv, now this is just a local Eruv inside a courtyard. What's the local layer, right? So the houses in the courtyard, so they can carry stuff in and out of their houses to that courtyard. Rav says if they made a courtyard, this leniency of Rabbi Shimon isn't going to apply. Why? Because we're concerned that since they have an Eruv in that courtyard, they will bring things in and out of the house, from the house to the courtyard. And now in that courtyard, there are going to be some objects which started Shabbos outside. Those can be transferred to other courtyards. And there's going to be other objects that started Shabbos inside the house and were brought outside during Shabbos. It could be plates from a matching set. One plate was inside when Shabbos started. One plate was outside when Shabbos started. The plate that was outside could be transferred to another courtyard. The plate that started Shabbos inside cannot. They look exactly alike. How can we tell which is which? We don't want to have a situation where there's confusion and people might come to violate Shabbos because they don't know which plate started inside and which plate started outside. And as we know, Rav was overruled on this, and Shmuel disagreed with him, and also citing Rabbi Yochanan, and this leniency of Rabbi Shimon applies even in courtyards where they do have an Eruv. And we're not concerned that people might come to confuse stuff that started indoors with stuff that started outdoors. It's their house, it's their yard. We want them to know the rule. They should know the rule, and we rely on them to be careful with their own stuff, and we don't make this extra decree upon them. But for this discussion that we're going to do right now, we're going to assume that Rav's limitation on Rabbi Shimon's leniency stands. Why does it stand? Because the discussion we're going to have right now is between Rav's student, Rav Huna, and Rav's son, Chiya bar Rav. Okay, so Rav's student and his son are having a discussion, and they're asking, according to dad, says his son, right? Or according to our master, says his student, where that limitation does exist, that you can only use this leniency in that courtyard that doesn't have an Eruv for it. So in that world, let's say we have a case of two courtyards with a ruin between them. Okay, so this is that example. There's two courtyards, and in between the two courtyards, there's a former house. It's a house that has now become a ruin, a chorva, right? So that house, it's no longer a house. It still is like a residence, but nobody lives there. The walls have been breached. They're falling apart. It's a former residence that was not fully torn down. Just parts of it remain, but no one lives there. And it lies between the two courtyards, as you can see in this figure. So then the question is, who gets to use that courtyard? Says Rav Huna. Now, in this situation, we're going to say that one of the courtyards, they made an Eruv in that courtyard. And so the houses that occupy that courtyard, they can carry stuff in and out of their houses and within their courtyard. And in the neighboring courtyard, they didn't make an Eruv. There's multiple houses there, but they didn't make an Eruv. So the people who live there are not permitted to carry objects in and out of their houses into their own courtyard. So who is going to get the use of the ruin? Are we going to say nobody can use it? Are we going to say that the residents of the courtyard that has an Eruv can use the ruin, but the other ones can't? Are we going to say that the ones who didn't make an Eruv get the use of the ruin, but the other ones don't? Or are we going to say that the residents of neither courtyard get the use of the ruin on Shabbos? That's the question that's being asked. Rav Huna says, so Rav's student, says, well, the sages confer the use of the ruin to the courtyard that doesn't have an Eruv. Now, this makes sense according to Rav, right? Because the concern is people who carry stuff in and out of their house into their courtyard, maybe they shouldn't be allowed to then use Rabbi Shimon's permit to carry things to other courtyards. So according to Rav Huna, the sages will give the use of the ruin to who? To the house that has no Eruv for carrying things in and out of their house, but they're going to be able to carry objects from their courtyard into the ruin. They can use the space of the ruin. Remember, the ruin is not a courtyard. The ruin is like a residence, but its walls are open now. But it has the status of a residence, but it opens into that courtyard. So according to Rav Huna, the residents in the courtyard that don't have an Eruv, they can carry stuff that's in their courtyard, that started Shabbos in their courtyard. They can carry those things in and out of the ruin. And the people that have an Eruv, the ruin is off limits for them because we're concerned that they will come to carry objects out of the house into the courtyard and from the courtyard out of the courtyard into this other location, the ruin, which it's not a courtyard. It's not really Rabbi Shimon's leniency. The question is if they have use of the ruin, it's like it's part of their own courtyard, but from there they might carry into yet another courtyard, and then they would have violated Shabbos. Rav's son, Chia bar Rav, says, no. The rights go to the courtyard that did establish an Eruv. They get to use the courtyard. It's part of, like, that the residence, the ruin is part of their courtyard. And therefore, it ends up prohibited to both, right? Because the ones who did make an Eruv, we're concerned that they're going to bring stuff out of the house and into the ruin, and so therefore they can't use it. And the ones that didn't make an Eruv, we're not going to, reward them for not making an Eruv by, in a sense, expanding their courtyard that's going to be permitted to use on Shabbos, so they can't use it either, right? They can't use it either. Now, but the halacha, and that's where their discussion gets to, but they never make a final ruin, so a final ruling. So in terms of who gets to use the ruin, we're not sure, but that was a discussion that they had. We move on to the second Mishnah. I'm going to read the Mishnah. This Mishnah is going to be discussing a case which is like this, where you have either a rooftop of a small rooftop that opens into a larger rooftop, or a small courtyard that opens into a larger courtyard. And so you can see in this figure here, it's in the case of a courtyard. There's the small courtyard, and so he only has 3 walls around his courtyard, or there's 2 houses there, but they only have 3 walls around them. And their little courtyard opens into a larger courtyard. We don't even know how large. It might be very large, but it's definitely wider, because what we see is that the large courtyard has walls in that 4th wall, but it opens into the smaller courtyard, right? So the smaller courtyard only has 3 walls. The big courtyard has 4 walls, but there's a big opening where it goes to the smaller courtyard. The Mishnah says, if a large roof was adjacent to a small roof, and the boundary between them was no wider than 10 cubits. That's Rav Steinsaltz adding his elucidation. But basically what it says, if a large roof was adjacent to a small roof, the large one is permitted for carrying on Shabbos, and the small one is prohibited. And it's the same for a large courtyard that was breached into a small one. It is permitted for the residents of the large courtyard to carry, but it is prohibited for the residents of the small one to do so. And the rationale for this difference is because the legal status of the breach is like an entrance to the large courtyard, right? So what they're saying is the small courtyard, its wall is completely breached into the big courtyard. It doesn't have a wall. It's been joined essentially into the big courtyard. But the big courtyard, it just has an opening in its wall that goes to the small courtyard. They're different status. Because the large courtyard has a wall and it's just an opening in the wall, it's like an entrance to the large courtyard. So the large courtyard, it has a wall surrounding it. It's just that the small courtyard it creates an entrance. It's just an entrance with respect to the big courtyard. For the little courtyard, it's lost its status as a courtyard because one of the walls is completely missing. So this is a case of the rich get richer, right? The rich get richer. The big courtyard remains a courtyard. It just has a big entranceway in one of its walls that happens to be like that entranceway is the full width of the small courtyard. But the small courtyard is no longer a courtyard. They're fully breached and they've lost their independent status as a courtyard. So that's the case that we're discussing in this Mishnah. For the big courtyard, it's like an entrance. For the little courtyard, it's a missing wall and it's not really an enclosure anymore. So the Gemara's first comment is, why are we learning this for both a roof and a courtyard? It would seem that since roofs and courtyards are the same kind of domain, and we have the same situation, a small one that lost its separation and is fully breached into the big one, but the big one just has a passageway into it. It's the same ruling, right? The big one is still intact. The small one has lost its independent status. Why do we have to learn it for both a roof and a courtyard? And the Gemara comments that, this is to help us understand these other rulings of Rav and Shmuel, which I think we haven't encountered yet. Rav would say, well, the reason we have it for roofs as opposed to courtyards is to say that a roof is like a courtyard. And sometimes you see when you have all these rooftops, especially in an ancient city, like you don't really know where the buildings below the rooftops begin and end, right? It's almost like they pave over the rooftops and it just looks like one big domain across the rooftops. And you're actually not sure where one building ends and the next one begins when you're walking across the rooftops. According to Rav, if those walls of the buildings below are conspicuous, then the roofs are going to have the same law as you would for a courtyard. But if you can't tell where the walls below begin and end, then it's different. Then it's like one big rooftop, and that's a different kind of situation. Shmuel has this other, and that we've seen, but the ruling of Shmuel we haven't seen, and he says that conspicuous partitions are necessary if lots of people use the courtyard or if lots of people use the rooftop. If so, then you need conspicuous partitions. In a courtyard, the partitions are obvious. You know where the fences are. On a roof, as we said, sometimes you don't know where one building ends and the next one begins. So if a lot of people use this rooftop, you need to have conspicuous partitions or conspicuous lines between the rooftops in order for the roof to have the same law as a courtyard. But if only very few people use it, just a few individuals here and there, the residents of one building or another, then it doesn't matter whether they're conspicuous or not. The rooftop will have the same law as the courtyard. Rabbah and Rabbi Zera and Rabbah bar Rav Hanan were sitting and learning. They were discussing this Mishnah, and Abaye, the great sage, was sitting beside them, kind of learning by himself, but he couldn't help but overhear the conversation that these other three rabbis were having. The three rabbis concluded that in studying this Mishnah, they said, well, learn from this Mishnah that the rights of residents of a large courtyard extend into the small courtyard, but not vice versa. Now, we've been talking about carrying on Shabbos, but these three rabbis are actually going to go a step further and say, you know what, this has legal ramifications beyond the law of carrying on Shabbos and creating an Eruv so we can carry from one domain to another on Shabbos. There's going to be other ramifications. What do they mean by that? Here's some examples. For example, if there's a large courtyard, and in that courtyard, the owner is growing vines, like grapevines, right? And then in the small courtyard, you cannot grow anything else, right? So we have a prohibition called kilayim, the prohibition of growing diverse kinds, right? So you can't grow, for example, wheat and grapes in the same plot of land. They have to be separated. Normally, they just need to be separated by 4 cubits. You can't intersperse these kinds of plants together. This is not because it's better farming practice. This is one of those chukim, one of those laws that we don't understand why. We do it because God said so. Just like God said, you can't eat milk and meat together. You can't work on Shabbos. They're good laws. They make sense in certain respects, but really they're unexplained, and we just do it because God said so. A man has to wrap tefillin every day. There's no logical reason why a man has to wrap these leather straps around his arm. Why do we do it? Because God said so. So you can't grow diverse kinds together. But that just means they need to be separated in separate areas. I mean, a farmer can have both crops. They just need to be separated by at least 4 cubits. But here these 3 rabbis are saying that because the legal rights of the big courtyard extend into the little courtyard that has no wall, whereas the big courtyard has a wall, it's just that the fallen wall of the little courtyard is only considered an entranceway for the big courtyard. For the little courtyard, it's considered a fallen wall. So if you're growing vines in the big courtyard, in the little one, you can't grow anything at all. You could grow vines, but you can't grow anything at all, even if you have that 4-cubit separation, because the legal rights of the big courtyard extend into the small courtyard. And another example, this one's, okay, this is like ancient law and colorful, right? So if a wife owns both courtyards, right? So she actually owns both courtyards. They're both hers. Nevertheless, the legal rights of the big courtyard extend into the little courtyard, and the legal rights of the little courtyard do not extend into the big one, even though they're owned by the same person. Likewise with the vines and growing something else. So the wife, if she's standing in the large courtyard and her husband takes a bill of divorce, which he has for a Jewish man and woman to be divorced, it's not going to be finalized until the husband hands the woman a bill of divorce called a get. Now, there's other ways to transfer it. You could do it through an agent if they can't be in the same room together for whatever reason. But there's also, and we'll learn this when we get to Tractate Gittin, which is all about Jewish divorce, one of the ways to hand her the get is to put it in her domain when she's standing in it, right? So it's almost like serving somebody with a summons to go to court. Sometimes you don't have to actually hand it to the person's hand, but because maybe they refuse to take it. But if you put it like they're standing in their house and you put it in their house with them, then they're going to be divorced. It's going to be that final step. If she's standing in the large courtyard and he puts the bill of divorce in the small courtyard, they have finalized their divorce because the legal rights of the big courtyard extend into the little courtyard. But if she's standing in the little courtyard and he places the bill of divorce in the big courtyard, they're not divorced, right? Because he has to give it to her. And she's standing in a place where the rights of the little courtyard do not extend into the big courtyard. So he didn't hand it to her. He doesn't have the legal status of having given it to her, and they are not divorced. Likewise, if 9 men are getting ready to pray, and they're all standing in the big yard, in the big courtyard, and one man is standing in the little courtyard. Now, you remember that for a Jewish prayer service, a traditional Jewish prayer service, to move forward, you need a quorum. You need a minyan in Hebrew, and that's 10 men. So if 9 of them are standing in the big yard, one of them is standing in the little yard, they have a minyan, because the majority are in the big yard and its rights extend into the little yard. However, if the 9 men are standing in the little yard and one man is standing in the big yard, then the majority are in the little yard, and they don't have, and their status doesn't extend, their legal right, the legal status of the yard doesn't extend to the big one, so it's not counted as if the guy in the big yard is one of them. They don't have a minyan until that fellow walks over into the little yard. And there are other examples as well. Having heard all these examples, Abaye turns to these 3 guys and says, there's something wrong with your logic. And now we're almost at the end of my teaching, so if you have questions or comments, make sure they go into the comments. Abaye says, having heard everything you just said, there's something wrong with the fundamental principle of everything you're saying. And they said, what do you mean? And he said, you have created a situation where you have a partition that prohibits. In other words, let's go back to the vines and the wheat, the grapevines and the wheat, for example, right? So if you just have a plot of land, okay, and you're going to plant grapevines here and you're going to plant wheat here, then all you have to do is have 4 cubits between them. If in addition to that you put a fence between them, great, it's even better, right? Those things are definitely separated. But now we have a situation where we have a partition between those 2 areas. Now we're calling them the large courtyard and the small courtyard. The fence is incomplete, right? The fence only, and we have a drawing of this situation, right? Where, okay, see right there, we have vines in the big courtyard, and now we've been told that we can't plant anything in the little courtyard. Because why? Because there's a fence around the whole thing, but particularly because of this fence right here, this little extension here, what's still left that surrounds the big courtyard, and it extends, well, on that side. And so it's that fence which we consider, from the point of view of the big courtyard, as if it extends all the way across. And this is just an entrance to the big courtyard, but it is the lost wall of the small courtyard. But nevertheless, because of that fence on either end, now we can't plant wheat over here, even if we separate it from the big yard from the vines in the big yard by 4 cubits, because of this idea that the legal rights of the big yard extend into the small yard. So this flusters the other 3 rabbis only for a moment. And they start saying, whoa, wait a minute. No, that's not quite right. And they're going to give a whole bunch of reasons why Abaye is wrong. Will Abaye's challenge to the 3 rabbis hold up? Tune in tomorrow on page 93. Okay, what have we got in terms of comments and questions? Lindsay said she ordered stuff from the Accidental Talmudist store, and she wrote, we love what we ordered. Excellent quality. I got to tell you, the shirts are all cotton and very soft cotton. The pillow is soft and well stuffed. Our partner in creating all these products is Teespring, and they do a really nice job. You know, the products are good quality products. And the designs, what can I say? I designed them. I'm a visual guy. I'm a movie director. And it was a lot of fun. I put a lot of time into it. So people are enjoying these products. They make great gifts. Absolutely great gifts. And by the way, in case somebody's wondering, the word Yid is Jew in Yiddish. Now, there's plenty of stuff in the store that doesn't say Yid or Grateful Yid. But we've been asked the question actually by Jewish people who say, isn't the word yid an insult, a demeaning word for a Jew? And I got to tell you, that's a terrible understanding of the word. Yid is what we call ourselves in our language, right? Yiddish, I mean, it's a language that developed in Europe that combines Hebrew and German and some other words. But it's our language. It's the language that European Jews spoke for 1,000 years and people still speak in Hasidic communities. And it's what we call ourselves. We are the Yidden. That's plural of Yid. We are Yidden. Right? So if somebody tells you that Yid is a demeaning word for Jew, that's their problem, not yours. You know, that's their anti-Semitism coming through. But we are very proud to be called Yid. And I love wearing my Yid shirt. It's a great conversation starter. And plus it has the wisdom candle, because at Accidental Talmudist, we light up the darkness and share the light of Jewish wisdom with all people. Okay, Sharon says, but I thought a ruin was like a residence and not a courtyard. Yes, you're right. A ruin is like a residence. The problem isn't carrying from courtyard to courtyard. It's that this residence opens to both courtyards. So there's the concern that you might get the use of the residence, carry stuff into the residence, and then end up carrying into that other courtyard. And if the object started Shabbos in the house of the courtyard that has an Eruv, a local Eruv, you know, for themselves, so they might carry something from the house into their courtyard, from their courtyard into their Eruv, into the ruin, if they get the use of the ruin. And then once it's in the ruin, they might end up carrying it into the other courtyard, not permitted. And that's what the rabbis were concerned about with the ruin. Sarah Lynn says, hold on a second. I'm not sure what that means. I'm sorry. Something about in the name of the rose. Are you talking about the Umberto Eco book, which I read 30 years ago? I don't really remember. It was a murder mystery set in a monastery. But I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know what's being said here, so I'm going to go on. Lynn says, can the husband leave a get in a temporary residence, such as if the wife was visiting her mother or a friend, etc.? Has it been delivered? That's the question. I don't know. You know, this was just an example that these guys cited in passing, simply to say that the wife has the she has received the get if she's standing in the large courtyard and he puts it in the small courtyard, because the legal rights of the big courtyard extend into the little courtyard. But if she's standing in the little courtyard and he puts the get in the big courtyard, she hasn't received it because the rights of the little courtyard don't extend into the large courtyard. In terms of the actual rules of how you deliver a get, and if you're standing at a friend's house or a guest's house or on the street or whatever, when we get to Masechet Gittin, when we get to Tractate Gittin, then those laws, we'll be learning those. I don't know those laws offhand. And Sharon says, if the wall is as if it goes across on one side, how can it not be so on the other side? A wall is not one-sided. I mean, that is a great objection. You would think that would hold up. And I think that would help us to understand it even better is if the small courtyard was much smaller, right? Where you could really see that in terms of the big courtyard, really it's an entrance, right? And the idea, by the way, is that this opening in the wall of the big courtyard should not be more than 10 cubits wide, about 15 feet, right? So what we're saying is the little courtyard is a really little courtyard, and its whole width is like the size of a doorway, right? An entrance, not a doorway, but an entranceway. That's why, in terms of the big courtyard, it just has an entranceway, but it's still a big courtyard. The little courtyard, it lost one whole wall, and so it's fully breached into the large courtyard, and that's what sets up this disparity and this unequal outcome. And that's why I titled today's show is, what if your neighbor is the 800-pound gorilla, right? If your little courtyard fully opens into his big courtyard, it's like the rich get richer. but maybe not. I mean, that's what the Mishnah says, so probably we're going to end up there. But maybe as we come to understand the Mishnah better, there's going to be some limitations on this. And right now, Abaye is challenging his three colleagues. It's possible also that Abaye was older than those three guys, so he's really challenging them to see, if their understanding of the Mishnah will hold up to his sort of Socratic questioning. And that's going to be for tomorrow. Okay, that's what I've got. So it's great learning with you all. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow for page 90. We did 92 today, right? Yeah, for page 93 of Tractate Eruvin tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great evening.